Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're in the Officers' Lounge. This is a part of the wardroom. We're on the extreme starboard side of the ship. And despite having access to perhaps the largest collection of Iowa-class blueprints that has survived, and despite knowing the internal layout of Iowa-class battleships, I mean, I'm probably in the top 10 people who know the insides of these ships that's alive right now. I made assumptions about this space. And I've had access to the resources to correct those assumptions. And here I am in my 8th year working on the battleship, and I've just finally figured it out. So, the assumption I made is that the lounge is a significantly later addition to the Iowa-class battleships. My thought process on that is, during World War II, the Iowas have a significant number of officers. Not just the ones assigned to the ship, but also those embarked for all the different detachments we have, particularly an admiral's flagstaff. So there are presumably a lot of people using this space, and they would need the entire space for tables and chairs for meal times and things like that. So it stands to reason that a space like this isn't added until the number of officers contracts, and that once it's added, it's probably not going to be modified all that much. Check out this faux wood paneling around here. If that doesn't scream 60s, I don't know what does. So my assumption was the 60s officers used their welfare and morale funds, their mess funds, to appoint this space, and then the 80s officers maybe rearrange the furniture some, but otherwise it doesn't change much. Well, we had a visit from a female who was on board the ship, Mary McKinnon. She worked for NAVC in the 1980s, and she came on board in 1987 after our yard period while the ship was doing a shakedown cruise, and she took some of the only interior pictures of the ship. She took pictures of her stateroom, which nobody ever takes. She took pictures of the wardroom and a bunch of other spaces that she was allowed to have access to, and the museum was able to scan some of those pictures. And so we were going through them the other day because we recently filmed a video up in the captain's cabin because her pictures of that space offered us new insight into how it was laid out. And one of the pictures just didn't make sense. You were looking through the door of the lounge and you could see the big fire control tube on the aft bulkhead. Well, you guys are standing at the door looking in. Come over here where I am and look out of the door. Not only can you not see the fire control tube, but you're looking at the forward bulkhead, not even the aft bulkhead. So we were trying to figure out how this picture worked. We come down here and look at this. We've got this complete enclosure wall here. We've got a complete enclosure wall over there. But in this large doorway, it's something different. It's open at both the top and the bottom. That's a later addition. Offering us further challenges is this walled-in area. There was some belief that the museum did this, but it definitely dates back to when the ship was in service, but it must have been very, very near the end of the ship's time in service. But we do know that this was part of the lounge, and there would have been a couple of additional couches and cases in here. So then we went back to the blueprints. And sure enough, the 80s blueprints of the ship show the lounge completely different than it is. In fact, it shows something that never existed on Battleship New Jersey. For some reason, to make the 80s blueprints of New Jersey, they took the 50s blueprints of Iowa and updated them. They did not take the 60s blueprints of New Jersey and update them. And they did not modify certain things on Iowa's blueprints, such as the layout of the lounge. So the lounge that they installed on Iowa, presumably while she was under construction at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, completely different than what New Jersey would have gotten at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So we go back in time, and the 60s blueprints show that the battleship had a wall that goes from here to, I don't know, roughly around there, and then there's a doorway leading out, and this entire area is the lounge, except that there's also a wall that comes here, because people are still using this door, the wardroom door over there. It's one of the few doors on the ships that's wider than 26 inches, and interestingly, the door on the other side is not. It's also got a much shorter lip than the door on the opposite side. So when you're hosting events on board, which fairly regularly happened, that's the door to go through. So there's a path from the door entering the rest of the wardroom with the lounge basically partitioned on both sides of it. So like, okay, that makes sense with what we're seeing from the picture. And if the picture's taken from roughly where you guys are, looking out the door here, well, there's that fire control tube back on the center aft bulkhead. So, okay, we now know that the lounge has changed sometime after 1987 when Mary McKinnon was on board for her NAVSEA inspection. And that's what we have right now. What we have right now is perfectly accurate. Our period of interpretation is 1990 when the ship was last on an active deployment. But now that's got me thinking, well, I've always assumed this. Let's go look at the older blueprints. And believe it or not, our older blueprints also show a lounge with that exact same footprint. So just goes to show you that every single day you learn something new, even if you've worked on your Iowa-class battleship for your 8th year now. Always learning something new. And it's super cool. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along for the ride. In some ways, there are so many spaces on this ship and so many blueprints, and even though we don't have a complete set of blueprints, there's so many of them that even after 8 years, I don't know them all yet. But the final proof in the pudding was, all right, we've now looked at the blueprints. We know that some of the blueprints are wrong for us. We know that what the blueprints are saying matches the pictures, but can we find any archaeological evidence of that? And so we come up here, and yes, I believe we can. So if you look right up here at the overhead, you can see welded tabs that were ground off on both sides of the stanchion. You can see a weld line along this. You can see it right there where it would go to the doorway. And so that is probably the last remnants of when this was completely walled off, with the exception of the doorway roughly right there. And then just before the ship is taken out of service, they must use the wardroom funds to put in this sitting area instead. Are there any compartments on the ship you want to see us do a deep dive into like we just did on the wardroom lounge? We can go through the blueprints and see how the space changed, what it would have been outfitted with originally during World War II, and that sort of stuff. Let us know if you like this type of video and what sort of space you'd like to see us do in a similar fashion in the future. Otherwise, it'll just be as something like this pops up and we see a new photo that tells us something new and makes us question all of the assumptions that we've had for nearly a decade. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support the museum. Your support allows us to keep doing these deep dive researches to learn our ship better. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.